Hey, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening, wherever you may be coming into the kitchen from. But want to welcome you out to the ZoomOSC Test Kitchen, where we meet every Thursday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Looks like we've got a pretty good gathering here today, bright and early. And so thank you for coming. We've got Andy Carluccio with us from Liminal, who is always so gracious with his time and knowledge to share the ins and outs of ZoomOSC and now ZoomISO as well. And a lot of chitter chatter out there about ZoomISO from Liminal and Zoom NDI, Zoom Rooms NDI as well. And we've done some. I'm sure we'll do it again today. Is kind of compare how really they complement each other really well, and really where they apply for individuals best also. So with that, Andy, I'll see if you have any kind of front end announcements that you want to kick things off with, and kind of start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. And hello, everybody. It's good to see you all. I just finished up shooting 10 tutorial videos on Zoom ISO. I have another 3 to shoot tomorrow. So hopefully sometime in the next 2 weeks, we'll have 13 new videos, literally hours of content on everything you could possibly want to know about this app. Kind of like we did when ZoomOSC first came out. We did a whole bunch of mini videos that are still getting views and are still relevant. So I'm covering everything from how to integrate Zoom ISO with things like vMix, Wirecast, QLab, Isadora, Mimo Live. I went through as many things as I could download free trials of and showed you how to connect them up. We're also going to talk about doing things like having the gallery outputs go out to a matrix view and how to do companion tie-in with vMix so that you can have a pad of buttons that really easily let you route people into your show. So those are the kind of things that we are recording right now. We're getting that material together. And the test kitchen has been a great place to sort of get a sense of what are the common questions so that we can try to address them in the stuff that we're putting out. We have 30 pages of documentation that I wrote and put out there between the quick start, which is not so quick anymore. It's 15 pages long of different possible questions that you could have. And then, of course, the user manual, which is another 15 pages of stuff that is more programmatic. But we hope that between that and the test kitchen and the resources that we're going to put on YouTube, that there's a really strong suite of offerings in terms of educational material about the product. So that's what I'm working on. I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff. Where do you want to go next?
Yeah, well, first, welcome anybody and everybody to fire up their cameras, kind of get engaged. This is the one thing about the test kitchens, be it the ZoomOSC Test Kitchen on Thursdays or Zoom Test Kitchen on Fridays. It's meant to be a community. It's not meant to be just a delivery. I certainly understand that there's folks who listen in, and I'm totally good with that. But if you can, we always invite you to fire your cameras up and get engaged, get to know people's faces, what they do. It's a great network of being able to ask questions amongst one another, even outside the designated days of the kitchen. So it's fun to get to know each other for sure. So with that, the other invitation is if you have ZoomOSC already, be it a trial or a paid license or whatnot, and you want to bring that into the ZoomOSC Test Kitchen, you're absolutely welcome to do so. If I don't recognize it by myself to give it the privileges that it needs to be functional and so forth. We might rotate that if there's a lot of them, but certainly welcome to bring in that license and test things out, because Zoom Test Kitchen is a workshop as well as a wealth of information as well. So certainly let me know, whether it's in the chat or just chime in and and ask me to extend some privileges to that particular machine. So I've got one in there. Andy's got one in there. Jeff OSC and Andy ZoomISO is in there from Andy. David Brady, actually, you have one that in there. I see. I'll promote you accordingly so that you can kind of mess with things. I mean, I've already got things going on. I have Rupert up there, but simple things. I just want to be able to get good at this, kind of have it there and see how quickly I can make things happen. And I'm not all that quick yet, but to be able to I have my my vMix / Zoom host PC that I'm on. That's my primary system. And in my vMix project, I have 4 NDI inputs that are just sitting there always just waiting for 4 NDI feeds. And then I have a MacBook Pro sitting next to me that is running ZoomISO and ZoomOSC all in one package. And so once I get the attendance list in ZoomOSC, ZoomISO, if you will, I can just assign whoever I wish to each one of those. So let me see. Rupert, I've got you assigned, but I think I did it prior to your camera coming on. Let me hit that again. There we go. And so now you're in the 4 up as well. And because I'm spotlighted, you see, instead of me, you see the that 4 up within my camera output as well. And then I have another system over here. Not that this matters too much, but I do have another system out here that's logged in. It's called Streamer, if you look in the participants, and that's just grabbing this meeting, and I have it in full screen so that I can capture that and bring it into vMix and stream it out to the different sites. Those sites being the primary site is the ZoomOSC Test Kitchen Facebook page, and here momentarily I'm going to share that out to the group and then the Zoom Test Kitchen group and page as well, so that others out there can participate, and especially that the meeting gets archived for there's a lot more reviews than there are people who can make it on the scheduled time as well. So I think that that's about it. Andy, if let's go to the folks that are here real quickly, and let me kill some spotlights and just ask everybody, feel free, raise your digital hand or chime in, and if it's quiet. If you've got questions, particular challenges, particular successes that you'd like to share with the community here as well, let's kick things off that way. And Andy will take notes if there's questions and make sure that we definitely include them and more.
I also built a Stream Deck profile this week that we can look at if we run out of things to talk about. I can show you how to route things into ZoomISO from your Stream Deck.
Awesome.
With the selection page, so we can take a look at that too.
Yeah, I downloaded. I told you last week. I'm like, oh, those beta builds have kind of kicked me in the rear on the companion, beta builds and all. But I did it today. I went ahead and downloaded the latest, and it's not production. It's the kitchen. I mean, if things are gonna break or hiccup, they will. But because primarily you said that in a preset now, I can basically assign an individual to an output, which instantly changes one of my vMix inputs, which instantly changes in my case, my 4 up. And so I can switch from that. So that's awesome. I'd love to see it. Somebody said somebody raised their hand. Now I missed it. David, was it you? Robert? No? Okay. All right. How many, real quick, I want to see if we can grow these numbers. They've been low, understandably low. Who's actually using? It doesn't have to be production, but who's installed ZoomOSC, ZoomISO, and at least have run it on their systems? A couple of you. All right. Who's used it in production? Let's go ZoomOSC since it's been out the longest. I definitely have. David has. Kurt, have you used it in production yet?
I've got it
Tom,
loaded up. I
Tom.
just haven't used it in production yet. Still interested in what it'll do.
Yeah, so if you don't mind me expanding on that a little bit, Tom Deenan says he's used OSC in production and using it. ISO, no, not yet, but Spike Rogers says every day, and so good stuff. It just continues to grow, and it is one of those things. I don't know if it's a little nervousness, to kind of take that plunge, or application. Say where would I use it? How would I use it today in production versus last week? Do you have any thoughts on that, Kurt? In the sense that kind of why not yet? Is there any particular known something that's holding you back?
Well, I haven't been doing a whole lot in Zoom now. I've actually got a client who's wanting me to do something for Teams, and it's been kind of just a weird variety of things we've been doing. I did a Zoom webinar recently where we didn't need it yet, but it's basically been that my service sector has not required it yet, and I've really got to delve into it. That's why I wanted to come back on here and get back connected. Plus, as you know, I've been moving locations and houses and offices, and I'm still in a temporary office right now in my house. I'm about to move into my semi-permanent office. So, and then I want to get everything set up. It just is so much taking things down and putting it up. And I'm still trying to grasp my uses of OSC and where it will best benefit anything that I work on.
Yeah. And if anybody has, thoughts on how you've applied it, in your world, it's not like I talk to, as many people as I can about it, and but I don't interview them all the time, and so I'll share that the folks who I have talked about and worked with, or we've kind of workshopped together and so forth. I haven't come across anybody in our space. I know, maybe theater, is a little different or whatnot, but in our, production streaming space in particular, which, quite a few of us are involved in, that their first step isn't simple spotlighting, toggle spotlighting, that same, not that it's tied to, has to be tied to Stream Deck or anything like that, but let's assume, Companion and Stream Deck, and now that one button that'll spotlight is the same button that can spotlight and unmute and unspotlight and remute, right? I mean, just simple kind of one button multi-action presses that can take place, and we have many of us have the multi-selection page as well on our Stream Decks, where you can kind of click 3 people and then say spotlight. And it spotlights all 3 of them at the same time. I mean, things that you just can't imagine being able to do with a mouse inside of Zoom, in some of the simpler meetings, let alone all the other many things that OSC gives us the opportunity. But it certainly, one, without a shadow of a doubt, I get work. Like to say every week. It's close. It's probably 3 weeks out of 4 of a month from an organization, because I'm on the top of their list as far as that goes, and a lot of that has to do with understanding and research and practice, but a ton of it also has to do with they know I've got ZoomOSC in my tool bag, and it just makes things go better. They don't come in and coach or anything like that, like they do with some of the other operators at times. So it's solid. It certainly sets you, ahead of the others, if you will, and just simply has you looking better, working better, and having really less problems. Fact is there's a built-in backup. I don't host my meetings in ZoomOSC. the ZoomOSC client. I just don't let that be my primary host, and it's not that that's a problem. It's just a very natural backup for me. Is I have my vanilla client from Zoom, if you will. That's my host client, and then next to me is the ZoomOSC client, and I log in that way. If anything, worst case scenario, and it did happen, and it wasn't OSC, it was Companion, that just kind of over time, the more people that came in the room, Companion went nuts on this one particular Mac that I had, and I've since stopped using that Mac because it did it twice, and said enough's enough, and now I'm on a 2015 MacBook Pro. And the one that I actually had an issue with was even newer, actually, which is kind of strange, but it was what it was. But with that win, it went nuts, and literally, Companion crashed, and I was, it was a one-man operator show, and I didn't have time to go fix it, right? Because they were actually fairly fast-moving programs. My backup was my mouse. I mean, just go do it, right? And you just kind of swing over here, and you just can't worry and stress about that, and it doesn't really ruin anything in that sense that it could have been a lot simpler, but it stopped, flying on that, and I didn't want to get distracted, and so swung across, used my mouse, and finished the rest of the show. And I had gotten 75% through it, so there wasn't a whole lot left. So, just having the confidence that it's not a brand new product / brand new single point of dependency. It can, if you frame it up accordingly, it can be an add-on, if you will, and you naturally have a backup in place as well. Fact of the matter is I could have had two ZoomOSC machines, one on my right side, one on my left side, and if one blew up, the other one, could be sitting there ready as well. I mean, that's all. The architecture itself certainly lets you do things like that, and even remotely if you needed to. So, hello, Ray.
I tell people the same thing all the time, Jeff. It's like, when they're first getting to use it, like, well, I have a system that I use right now, and can I fall back on that? And I'm like, well, the good news is when you launch the app, it's a Zoom client. It has all the same buttons, looks exactly the same way. So your backup is what you normally do. So, in that sense, whether you have a separate computer that's dedicated, which I recommend, I tell people all the time, always have, even if we're running just regular Zoom, I have 2 instances in my office logged in. So I always suggest, if you're going to run ZoomOSC, have a vanilla Zoom or a second ZoomOSC logged in with the co-host privileges at least, ready to jump in if there's something you got to do. But what's fun about it is a lot of the original users, they came in and they learned, okay, spotlighting, and then so they did, spotlighting on a Stream Deck or in Isadora in the early days, and then they would do the rest of it, with a mouse click or something like that, and then they say, okay, well, is there a way to, can I send that chat message that I want to send, at the top of the day? Can I have that with a button? And then they add that button. Then they stop doing that in the user interface. And eventually they kind of graduate out of any of the mouse clicks or the UI interactions, and they have it all sort of abstracted. But it's not that you have to, it's built very intentionally so that you don't have to learn 100% of the app to get started. You pick one vertical that you want to go down, and you start building for that, and then you can absorb more as you and you look at your workflow. You look and see, okay, what is the thing that takes 90% of the time, because sometimes it's simple. There are some things in a Zoom meeting that are easy to just access through the user interface, and there's some things that are not. So and it depends on how often you do those things, right? So just taking stock of that has been helpful.
Good stuff. Thanks for that. We've got a really great group. I don't know if that means everybody's calendars are free like mine. July seems to be a slow month for several people I work with. And I mean, I'm out there going, hey, I'm open, man. They're like, hey, we're really open too. I'm like, damn it. So anyways, I just have to learn to appreciate several days of kind of quiet, and it'll be study time and test time. And prior to opening up the kitchen today, I had my iPhone up in front of me, and I was using it as it was literally mounted right on top of my my Canon EOS R that I use, and so there was no angle difference or zoom difference or anything. I just wanted to see how well it would color match, and so I had a HDMI dongle out of the iPhone and using Filmic Pro, and once I got it color shaded just a little bit, it was other than the elevation of it, slight elevation of it, it was very difficult to see the difference between the two cameras. So I was really impressed. And it's only an iPhone 8. It's not even one of the newest, that really just their cameras are amazing. But it does a great job. And kind of what turned me on to that is I'm involved with the beta program of Cinemaker right now, and I'll tell you, and they'll be. I'm going to have them in the Zoom Test Kitchen after they get this next release out, which has some Zoom integration with their product as well. But being able to, take an iPad as my director, if you will, and have, like 4 iPhones and, even wireless. It's amazing how well it works. It's really actually quite amazing how well it works. Imagine having I just imagine even at like simple church events or small events, the portability of being able to walk into a gig with my iPad and 2 to 4 iPhones and 4 tripods blows my mind. If their network and the quality of their wireless is up to snuff. Not that that's we know that's kind of our anti-recommendation, but what they've done and how they do it is really darn impressive. So it is quite cool what's coming. So they'll demo that over time as well. So kind of keep your eyes open for that announcement. So Andy, I kind of feel like this is probably the largest Zoom OSC kitchen we've had in a little while,
Yeah.
as far as turnout. And so I wonder if we, couldn't, just kind of start from, the basics there, and then maybe a demo of, I don't know how well set up you are with. I have my Stream Deck set up actually. We could go back and forth on that a little bit, but show that and then let that just inspire some thoughts and questions, and naturally provide answers for folks as well. But and then for sure, get some ZoomISO, demo out there as well. It's kind of tell us, hey, how's it been going with ZoomISO with its release and acceptance and excitement and so forth in your world?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's been a lot of copies that have moved out into the world, which has been super exciting. Some from independent producers, some from big names. So that's been cool to see. Get to talk to some neat folks and think about how is Zoom going to be used as a contribution system. But I'm totally down today to start, just because we have so many new folks here. Why don't we build a switcher in Companion? Just spotlight some people inside of Companion here and just have buttons, put the names on them, and show them how that works.
Let's do that.
That could be the basis for from building from there. Ray, I don't know, you have a quick question or something like that you want to jump in with?
I do. Because ZoomISO is Mac only.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any recommendations for a system that it would run well on?
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the videos I have to shoot tomorrow, is that we're going to do system design in ZoomISO. And the recommendation I want to give you is to get an M1 Mac Mini, the 699 copy, and then be good to go. The trick of it is that NDI on M1, NDI 4 on M1 is a little bit shaky. So when NDI 5 comes out, I believe the 699 M1 is going to be a slam dunk. The problem is it's just not there today. And developers don't have access to, or at least this developer doesn't have access to it yet, to be able to actually switch over to NDI 5. But we're going to do it as soon as we have access to it. So it's sort of a weird recommendation right now, where it's, if you're an SDI and you're using the ATEM, slam dunk, go get the M1 and get a Sonnet enclosure and put a DeckLink Duo in it, and there's your 4 outputs coming right out into the system. If you're doing NDI, you technically still need to be on some Intel-based offering. But I'd hate to tell you today, you'll get an Intel Mac Mini for twice the price of what will be able to do the same thing in 2 or 3 weeks with an M1. So that's where I'm at today. I think if you can hold off, or if you go ahead and bite the bullet on the M1 and know that and if you're NDI based and know that the NDI 5 is coming, then I think that will that'll be a pretty solid recommendation. And we're gonna walk through all the elements of that system, but you should be able to get 5 1080p 30 outputs and 9 720p 30 outputs, and then God knows how many 360p outputs you can get on top of that, plus your screen share, plus your gallery view, plus your primary display, plus your automatic gallery crops. You can have quite a few things coming out of that, because it's a good system, but it just the NDI on it is shaky, so we have to wait for that to get upgraded.
What do you mean by shaky?
Yeah, so it's weird. There's a lot of NDI 4 on M1 isn't natively supported, so it's not accelerated. So it's running through emulation, and it means that it doesn't scale very well. So one output is probably fine. You add 2 outputs, you start dropping frames. 3 outputs, it's like a slideshow. And that's just true.
Really, that's really bad. Okay.
Yeah, it's true. That's true of pretty much any NDI app that's going to run on an M1 right now. Now, again, NDI 5 has native Apple Silicon support, so you'll get accelerated encode and decode, which is just a whole different ball game once that's available.
50 streams out. No, just kidding.
Yeah. Well, we all laugh, but I actually did a video yesterday where I had 50, and it was really simple. All you had to do was log into the call and tick the box for gallery outputs and be on a 49-person Zoom call. And then you get 49 NDI feeds. Now they're super low res, right? But there's a lot of them. And the idea is that you can then do all sorts of compositing and mixing and things like that based on what you're doing there. So stuff to think about. Anyhow,
Cool stuff.
yeah,
I mean, we
so-
talk about it already, and I mean, especially Andy, who's been, developing this and working with this and testing this for who knows how long now, right? But
Too long.
but just casually say, 9 outputs out of a single machine. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, anybody who's been doing productions and been forced to have Zoom as part of the platform and bringing people speakers in on Zoom only. I mean, all it's doing is emulating, let's say, vMix Call or OBS Ninja or something like that, right? And having to bring them in and getting a maximum with a lot of hardware investment and or kind of dummy HDMI emulators or something like that. Such a pain in the butt, and a big real estate taker and a bank account, taker and all that to know and realize that, on a single Mac right now, I've got 4 1080s, and I don't feel like I've hit a limit. If I brought up my process monitor, it actually is not running hot, but I've got to look at my network as well. But still, it's just amazing that, this is a, it's a new product release for sure, and it's an enhancement to our space, but it's truly the time I would really refer to it as it's a time for consolidation. I mean, it's really, really, really making a big impact on consolidation. I was involved in IT years ago when VMware was released, and the hypervisor was introduced, and we're trying to sell it, and people selling servers were super pissed off at us because they just didn't think they'd ever sell another physical server again, and so forth. And that was the whole effort. It was called server consolidation. And it's really exactly what's going on with us right now. Is with NDI and its reliability and so forth, to be able to get easily better than twice the outputs we could with the physical investment is just fascinating to me. So it's good stuff.
Yep, and it's all there. I mean, that's what's cool about Zoom is that it's a super, for developers, for everything I'll say about their SDKs from time to time when I'm in the middle of it, like they're super open, and they allow for third parties to do this kind of stuff. And so we, the Zoom client they've planted their flag on how they're going to implement NDI. It's going to be in the rooms, and it's going to be designed for businesses and things like that to be able to do distributed IP video distribution through their physical infrastructure. But we have, as Liminal, we have the option to then build off our own sort of branch of Zoom and say, okay, well, we're going to do something similar, but it's targeted really for production folks. And so that was cool. And the same thing too with ZoomOSC being able to just take the user interface layout, which, they spend a lot of time figuring out where to put that stuff, and there's a lot of requests. It's definitely not haphazard. There is a specific story behind the location of every button, I'm sure. And some of the oddities that we face in production are natural for education or something like that, right? So for us then to be able to say, all right, well, let's just make an API that allows you to hit every one of those buttons and get the status of everything you see on screen back, and then you can figure it out in your own custom interface, and we'll help you build them or put them on a Stream Deck or do whatever you want. That's kind of the idea of ZoomOSC, and I think that's a good transition. Is that it's designed to allow you to decide how everything's going to get built and how it's going to get routed. And that can be daunting for some coming in for the first time, who think, oh, I have to build all this massive infrastructure. But the cool thing is once you start to look at it, we have a lot of presets available, and our community has made a lot of things with it. So all you got to do, if you're starting off fresh, all you got to do is download the app, download a preset, and you're good to go. And then you can start spotlighting people right away. And that's, we'll look at some of that today. I'll probably be a little bit more technical because I'm biased and I like that stuff. So you'll probably see some of the how-to, some of the back-end stuff as we go through it. But if your end goal is just make a Stream Deck that you see the names and you hit a person and you spotlight them, you don't have to know what dynamic variables are. You don't have to know what username and target types are. You don't have to know what any of the OSC networking. You don't have to know our API. You don't have to even look at it, right? You just download the preset, run ZoomOSC, they connect, you're done. So that's and that's been a big push for us, and that's going to be the next big push in the life of ZoomOSC, is going to be spending a lot of time on the presets and a lot of time on the, what does it take in the first 5 minutes of using this app to be in a meeting and controlling all sorts of aspects of it. Like we'll go through, and Benjamin's been really good about this, is just creating pages and pages of companion presets. And we had a meeting the other week where we just laid out 3 or 4 pages of possible modules, front ends, presets, Isadora, QLab, companion, all that stuff. So that's what we're going to be pumping out next after the 4.05 release. So anyway, Jeff, if we're good, I'll go ahead and go into tutorial mode, and I'll show people how to log in and how to tie it all together. Great.
Definitely.
Sweet. So I'm going to go over to a virtual video source now. And if you could spotlight that for me, Jeff, that'd be great. You should be able to see my desktop now. What I've got here is I've just run ZoomOSC for Windows. So when you do that, you get this gray floating window. These are your ZoomOSC settings. And then you get apps that look like Zoom. This here and this here, your sort of your login parameters. So this is what we call the sidecar over here on the left. This is available on both platforms. They look a little bit different on Mac. On Mac, it's sort of more in the Mac OS way of looking at things, but it's still this idea. All the settings that you see are available on both. They're just laid out a little bit differently on Windows versus on Mac. So I've already logged into my app. You can log in if you have a non-SSO account and just put in your Zoom information. You can log in. You can use only join in a meeting that supports it. Now in the Zoom Test Kitchen, in the ZoomOSC Test Kitchen, login enforcement is required. So you would have to both create an account and register that account to be attending the session. So if you're following along with me, you need to register an account for this session. So I have a free Zoom account that I just went and created, and I tied it up with some old AOL email address of mine, and that's the one I use now forever with ZoomOSC. I create all my meetings with my paid Zoom account or with my client's Zoom account if they have one. So I get all the benefits of having a pro account, but I have the easy throwaway login that I can just kind of tie up with my ZoomOSC, and I never have to think about whether I have it logged in somewhere else or anything like that. So just something to think about. And if you have an SSO account, like you have login with Google, or something like that, you can use the app with ZoomOSC, but you need to, in your Zoom portal, enable a password for that account. So you can type something into ZoomOSC to log in with. And that'll hopefully change in the near future as Zoom is working on a new login pipeline for the SDK, which we're excited about, but we'll see where that goes. So now you're at the step where you probably have seen, a meeting invitation at some point that showed up in your inbox as a hyperlink, join text or something like that. And now you need to get your ZoomOSC into the meeting. Well, if you know the ID and password, you can just type in meeting number, meeting password, and username and hit join, and you're good. Now, if you don't know that, though, because all you received was an invitation, you can actually extract this information from the URL. So over here after the /J, where this string is here, you might recognize this as the meeting ID. And so I'm just going to go ahead and copy that and paste that in where it says meeting number. Now, at the end here, it says PWD equals, and then it has this long string of tests. And we all kind of know that the password for the kitchen is ZKitchen, right? It's all lowercase z, capital K kitchen. And if we knew that, we could type that in. But if we're just presented with this string of text, ZoomOSC will actually allow you just to paste that whole long thing in as the password, and it will accept it. So if all you have is the URL, you just copy out the ID and you copy out the password, and you're good to go. I'll go ahead and name this ZoomOSC, and I'll just do -liminal so I can distinguish it among the others, and I'll hit join. And in a moment, it'll show up in the waiting room, and I'll admit it from the waiting room.
That password's just base64 encoded, right?
Yeah, it's
okay.
just we'll call it the long form. Maybe not so much encrypted.
In progress.
Not encrypted at all, but
Right.
yeah.
And just bear with me for a second. I'm going to have a double mic here until it loads. All right, so I just left computer audio so I don't have a double output or a double input. I'm going to say OK to the recording, and I'm in. So ZoomOSC looks exactly like Zoom. You have all your buttons, your settings, your different panes. You can open up, you can look at the chat, you can look at all of that stuff here. It's exactly like a Zoom client. And then you just, at this point, now we just have this floating settings window, right? So now that we're in, there's a couple of things we can do. We're going to build a spotlighting controller where we get the names of the people in the meeting. They show up on the keys of my Stream Deck, and we'll be able to hit a button and spotlight them. But before we do anything, just like any Zoom client, in order for it to be able to do something in the meeting, it needs to have the permission it needs to do that. So spotlighting is something that is reserved only for hosts and co-hosts in a Zoom meeting, and ZoomOSC is not going to be getting around that. So we'll need the host of the meeting to give ZoomOSC co-host privileges to be able to spotlight. And so if you ever see something like error 4 when you try to run a command, that's because ZoomOSC doesn't have permission to do the thing that you're asking it to do. And it'll say, error 4, incorrect circumstances. And that can be for a variety of reasons. The most common thing is like you try to spotlight without being a co-host or a host. Or maybe you tried to spotlight, but there's only 2 people in the meeting. So you are a co-host, there are 2 people in the meeting, but you can't right click and spotlight somebody. So ZoomOSC won't be able to do it either, right? So that's just another sort of a metric to keep in mind. It's a little bit different when you might not realize it when you're not clicking through the user interface and don't see that setting anymore. That's why ZoomOSC is not able to do it. But anyway, let's go over to the settings tab here, and I'll sort of put that center screen. So here on the left-hand side, we have the OSC network settings. That's going to be the transmission IP, the transmission port, and the receiving port, as well as the output rate. Transmission IP is where is ZoomOSC sending commands to. ZoomOSC is listening to events that happen in the meeting, turning them into OSC packets, and shooting them out into your network. This is where it sends them. 127.0.0.1 is local software loopback. So if your software is running on the same computer, this is where you'll want to be sending it. If you have another computer, go find its IP address, type it in there. The transmission port is the UDP port where those OSC messages are going to get routed to. So again, this is starting to get into networking, but OSC, again, it's a network protocol for sending commands between devices. All you have to do is make sure that these match up. So if you're expecting 1, 2, 3, 4 on, this is like what Isadora would use, for example, then you put 1, 2, 3, 4 in there, and your app should document this and tell you, or it'll give you the option to input it like we do. So you just have to make sure that these things sync up. And same with the receiving port. The receiving port is, hey, you're sending me a command, send it on 9090 right now, but you can set that to a different port if you have another app that is using 9090, for example. And finally, the output rate. This is how fast can ZoomOSC send messages out into your network. There are some apps out there like Isadora that can't receive OSC messages more frequently than 100 milliseconds at a time. So every time an OSC message sends, to guarantee that you won't drop a sample, you have to space them out with 100 milliseconds in between. So you have this drop-down list of different time delays that you can put in between your output packets. And if you set it to 100 milliseconds, Isadora will never drop a packet. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're setting this up. I won't get into remote controls and subscription levels and all of that for now, but those are the basic settings we need to connect. Because if we pop into Companion, this is what the information that we need to set this up. So BitFocus Companion, I'm currently running the latest beta build. So it's why it might look a little different from the one that you might have. I'm going to go over to my connections area. I'm going to disable my existing ZoomOSC instance so I can go ahead and create a new one. So the way it works in the new Companion is a little bit different than it works today. On the right-hand side, you have a browser where you can search for the different instances, and you'll see liminal ZoomOSC listed as an option that you can add. So I'm going to go ahead and add that, and I'm just going to call it, I'm going to leave it defaulting to ZoomOSC. So I'll just maybe change the capitalization there. And lo and behold, you have the same settings here that you had in the other app, and you need to make sure they match. So target IP 127.0.0.1, that's the same. Target port 9090, that's where we expect that. Feedback port 1234, that's going to be the same. And subscribe mode all. I'm going to hit save there. And I'm going to wait a second. And where it says error right now, it should then switch to OK. And that means now ZoomOSC and Companion are communicating with each other. So now we're able to build things with data coming back from ZoomOSC. So I'm going to go into my buttons area, and we're going to build some buttons. I've gone up to page 4 because I have some stuff on my other pages that we'll look at later. But if you want to go over to presets, this is a really fast place to get started. So I have vMix in here. I'm going to ignore that for now. But Liminal ZoomOSC has presets, and we actually have quite a few now where we didn't before. What I'd recommend doing to start is with the list index selection. So this is list index spotlighting, I think, is where we're going to start today. But there's all sorts of different presets you can click on. When you click on one of these, you get a page of buttons. And you can drag these buttons individually onto your Stream Deck. So if you have a 6-key Stream Deck, you might want a different layout than a 15-key Stream Deck versus a 32-key Stream Deck. So the way Companion addresses that need is by allowing you to drag these out into the space. So I'm going to just drag one button, and then you see it turned red. I'm going to click on it, and let's see what it is. So this says Jeff Widgren Spotlight. If you look at the button text, you have this weird kind of weird looking string over here, and this is called a dynamic variable. For developers, this is how you can tie in information that changes on the fly in ZoomOSC right to the text of a button. But you don't have to understand how dynamic variables work. We've already created them for you to drag over. But that's just why it looks a little different there. What does this button do? Well, it toggles Spotlight for the user with list index 0. And it displays the name of the user with list index 0. And then it has feedback for the Spotlight status of that user as well. So when they're spotlit, they'll turn green, and when they're not, it'll turn red. Now, Spotlight status is still experimental. In 4.0.5, there'll be an actual list of the people who are spotlit, and that's where this is preparing for. Again, this is the beta build. But I'll go back to presets, and I'll just drag a couple more. So I'll go to my list index Spotlight, and I'll just start dragging my indices. And I have a 32-key Stream Deck, so I'm going to go all the way to the end. Like that. And I'll just keep going. And I'll make 2 rows for now.
You've done a great job with these presets, by the way, because I've used quite a few presets from other vendors, and they're not dynamic. I mean,
right.
Like these buttons, is it fixed to 32? Or if we had 12 people in the meeting, would you see 12 presets there?
You would have, so what you would have is more buttons available to select from. Actually, this is, I think this is only your first 32 indices here, but you can create more of them. It's basically how many can you fill a page with. And then we have a guide on how to change the base number if you want to have another set as well. And that's where our companion configs come in and all of that. But does raise a question. What if you have fewer than the number that we provide you? What you'll see is a dash. So that key will just have a dash in place of a name. It'll still be built out. As soon as you join a meeting, it'll populate with the names. And what's cool about this is that I've built this once, and these buttons are good for every meeting I ever go into now. As soon as ZoomOSC joins the call, it'll rename these buttons to be the people who have those indices there. So you build your controller once, and this is a really important thing when we were thinking about building ZoomOSC. This was a really important point I was trying to drive. I wanted people to build controllers once and then be able to bring them into all of their meetings without ever having to change them again. And this is how you do that. It's dynamic variables and list indices and all that stuff. Now, we'll talk more about how to, if you want to make a one-off button or something like that, we could talk about how to do that. But we're utilizing all the tools of Companion, but we did it for you, so you don't have to understand them, because it can get kind of complicated, dynamic variables and list indices and all that stuff. But let's try out some of these buttons. So I'm going to go over to the emulator, and I'm going to tab up to page 4 where I have my stuff here, and I'm going to zoom in a bit so that we can make this easy to see. Now I have a physical Stream Deck in front of me, so I'm going to actually click on it. And let me just verify that ZoomOSC is a co-host. No, it's not yet. So Jeff, would you be able to pass ZoomOSC-liminal co-host?
There you go.
All right, great. So I'm going to just hit one of the buttons of somebody who I know has video on. So I'm going to go for you, David. So I'm going to hit that button there. And now David is spotlit. So if you're looking inside of the Zoom call, you'll see David is spotlit. and we can start to cut now. So I'm going to spotlight myself again, like that. And let me see, who else can I grab here on my keys. I can't spotlight people with video off, I believe. So so that's where we can start to talk about like states and instance feedback and things like that. But
I can read a few out. Ray's on, Tom is on, Rupert is on.
So let me do a couple of things there. So I've just created 3 now. So we've got some spotlights in place there. So point made. This is how you would be able to start to add people to a spotlight inside of the Zoom call. So let's look back at how that button was done so we can see a little bit more there.
But Andy, as you pointed out, you said that the color change wasn't always working. And I don't see color change in this instance. Oh, you actually have them, the letters are turning white.
Yeah, so well, but that's another thing. So this is in the beta builder companion, we're preparing for ZoomOSC 4.0.5.
Okay.
And the spotlight status will indicate whether that person is spotlit or not. So I'll be able to then remove that. So right now, if I hit a double click, I can take away the spotlight. So I'll take David out of the multi-spot right now by just hitting him a second time. Now, at a glance, it's not obvious who the spotlight is. So that's where it's the groundwork is laid for the next ZoomOSC update. So it's a little weird. I'm using the beta build.
I got you. I'm sorry.
No. That's great, because it leads me to the idea of selections. So that's almost immediately where I'm going to pivot to next, because I think it's a more realistic workflow. So if I were to go to page 5 and we were to do this again, I would actually recommend that instead of doing what I just did, where you have buttons where you hit them and it spotlights them, I would suggest that instead you make a list selection area and then a panel of buttons that are related to the actions you want to do for that person. So if we look at list index selection, it looks exactly the same as what we had before. I'm going to drag over a couple of buttons here, and then we'll see what they actually are under the hood. But as far as the operator is concerned, it's just names. And I'm gonna do again 2 rows of that, like this. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna leave some space on the right, and I'll explain why in a minute. But let's look at what this button does now. So it says, all right, same thing as before. Name the key with the list index 0, and the action though is toggle selection. And then we have instance feedback that is just a selected property. So if we go back to the emulator, let me hop up to page 5, and I select that button. Sorry, I'm going to page 5, select that, it turns green. Select again, it turns red. But nothing's actually changed, right? I didn't actually do anything in this meeting. I just toggled the selection there. So I can hit a bunch of buttons too. I can turn a bunch of them green, and then I can turn a bunch of them red again. So it's basically just feedback. Did you press this key at some point? Well, why would you want to do that? Well, the idea of it is that now on the right hand, anywhere I have free space, I can create a button that's an action. And this is going to be where I'm going to show you how to make your own button. So I'm going to add a regular button, and I'm going to say spot. And this is going to be my spotlight button. And I'm going to leave everything else alone on terms of its styling, but you could add a background color, you could change the foreground color, font size, anything you want there. You could even add a picture if you want. I'm going to go down to the press actions area. I'm going to type in ZoomOSC. Here's all the ZoomOSC actions. We want to spotlight somebody, so I'm going to hit spotlight. It says spotlight user. And then it says which user. Well, we could have all sorts of different users. If you want, you can pick the explicit person that you want from this drop-down list. But if you do that, it'll only apply in the meeting that you're in. You set it up, at this point, and this is a good, I need to do something quick. But what you actually want to do is you want to go over to selection and then put a 0 in the user identifier. And what this will do is this will select the first user who is selected, and it'll do a spotlight on them. So if I go back to the emulator and I manually remove Jeff's spotlight from the user interface here, and I'm on page 5, and I zoom in again, I'm going to hit, I'll do David here. I'm going to select David. I'm going to select spot. And now we spotted David. And then I can unselect and hit Jeff and spotlight. And now we have Jeff spotlight. And I can select myself and spotlight. And now I'm spotlit. So we're almost there, but it's still kind of weird that I have to unselect the last person that I selected. It's an extra click that I shouldn't have to do, right? So the way to do that is to add a second action. What's cool about Companion is that you can keep stacking these. You can make it do multiple things at once. So I'm going to go into ZoomOSC, and I'm going to start looking. All right, we got pins, spotlight, video, audio, remote chat, raise lower hands, roll actions, screen share actions, app actions, selection actions. I'm going to hit selection actions. I have the button that allows me to add to the selection, but instead I want to clear the selection. I want to clear the selected user 0. So now what should happen when I hit that button? So if I go over here and I say, all right, David, you're coming back, I hit that and the selection clears at the same time. So now I don't have to hit that release for David. I can just, if I want to cut to Jeff, I can cut to Jeff. If I want to cut to me, I can cut to me. And what's cool about this is you can go really, really fast. You can really cut a show now at high speed that you wouldn't be able to do in any other situation. So that's what's cool about ZoomOSC now, is you can fly through these. The original use of ZoomOSC was for the Tofana production of Mad Forest, where we had 300 cuts in the course of an hour, and 12 of them happened in 1 second. It was syllables of a word that were required to have cuts on. So down to that level of precision and speed is what ZoomOSC has been validated on, if that's any consolation. So, so that's making a spotlight control. And you could, what's cool about this, and the reason I'd recommend this, is now maybe you want to spotlight a video on request, a muting request, whatever functions you want. You don't have to have a whole page dedicated just to that job, right? You can just you can build it out so that you have a panel of people, and depending on the size of your stream deck, you can shrink and grow that, and then you can add your buttons on the right or the left.
Can I add a wrinkle?
Yeah, please.
Or a challenge? Can you make it so those change a different color if somebody's speaking?
Yes, I can. So let's add a let's see, there's a bunch of different statuses here. So let's go ahead and modify Jeff's button here. So instance feedback is what controls the color of the key. Instance feedback has a whole overhaul in the next version. So this might be a little different from what if you're following along, this might look a little different for you than how it looks today. So the user is selected via the list index as before. This is what's keeping it related to list index 0. The property is selected, but look at all the properties that are here. You have user role, online status, video status, audio status, active speaker status, hand raised status is selected, current camera device, current mic device, current speaker device. So tons of possible triggers for the color of this key. So if we want, what we could do is we could basically, create a new page, and we could go into the presets and we could add up, a bunch of maybe we want to do something where it's not selection, but maybe it's like audio. We want to mute the person who is speaking because we're mad at what they're saying or something like that. And so you want to have a highlight on the person who's talking so you can mash the button to take them out. So if we went and did list index audio, we could add in these states here, like so. Let me just add a couple, and you'll see that right now mine is green. Why is mine green? It's my mic status. So as people unmute their mic and mute their mic, we can see whose mic is open. Now, if what you mean, Aaron, though, is literally is currently sending audio into the meeting, is the speaker, we would change the feedback status from audio status to active speaker status. So if I change that and I stop talking and then Jeff takes over speaking for me, drum roll.
I can do that. It turned to green.
Yep. And then if I take it back from you, I don't, let's see, I might have to, I have to have the release also be related to the active speaker status as well. So now you're back to red. Now it's only going to be Jeff's key though, because I only changed that property on one button. But you could go ahead and modify that to your heart's content. And then if you did that for every button on the page, if we repeated this process, for a couple minutes, you'd have a panel that was all your buttons were red except for one, which is the active speaker, and that one would be green.
I was just thinking that it'd be really cool if you're setting up a spotlight switcher configuration, if the button highlighted when somebody started speaking, so that you knew that you could switch to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's cool. Yeah. I figured it was there.
It's totally there. And again, you can look at all of the different, there's all sorts of parameters. Maybe you want to spotlight people who have their hand raised and you want to see whose hands are raised. And so you want to quickly select them from a list, make it yellow or something like that. And you can stack these, right? You could have this on off thing, but then I could add another parameter, on top of all of this that turns it yellow if they're, what would it be? It would be a user feedback action, I think would be what I'd be looking for. Yeah, it would be a user status feedback. And let's say, okay, turn the key in the background key to like this random yellow color over here. Sorry for your eyes. And then do the selection index 0 property hand raise status. So Jeff, go ahead and raise your digital hand. Okay, let's see. Did that grab it? No, it didn't grab it. Why not? Okay, hand raise status. Value on, value off. All right, value on. Okay, then I have to add the opposite for it too. That's why. Well, you get the idea. So you could then set it back to, I guess it would be black or red or whatever you're looking to do when you add the opposite of it from the selection.
I might have messed with you because I renamed myself a few minutes ago and then renamed myself back too. So here.
Well, it's all good. So the idea, it would look something like this though. It would be, now if it's off, set it back to black. And that would be changing the color of the key based on whose hand is raised. Now, again, I've only done it for one button. So you'd have to do it for all your buttons for it to actually be useful, because I haven't set it for anybody else, just for Jeff. So something to be aware of, but you can stack instance feedback to constantly change the color of that key. And then there's now a thing in Companion where you can poll for that status from other buttons. So if one button is one color, another button could be a different color based on that button's property having changed. So you can build out some interesting logic trees now inside a Companion that you couldn't do in the current release build. So it's just something to think about.
So Andy, do you I mean, it for the color feedback, status feedback, instance, it is listening, right? It's listening and doing, but might I add, in a really limited way as far as colors. I mean, do you ever foresee it listening and acting on what it's heard? I mean, so when that raised hand goes up, spotlight. I mean, we do it in Isadora. We've done it in Isadora. It listens and responds. And is it something that Companion will be able to support someday somehow?
Well, unfortunately, I don't know the exact answer for what the roadmap is. I can tell you though that it's named Companion for a reason. It's designed to be alongside of that operator. It's giving them information and waiting for them to do things back. There isn't a system inside of Companion that allows you to. There are some things that are changing in the future, and that might asterisks on this answer. But like for the main workflow that you're talking about, no, though, like there isn't a way today to be able to have a piece of feedback information automatically trigger an output action that is somehow related to that piece of feedback. That architecture doesn't exist, and that's where we would push you to Isadora and Universe as integrations, because they can, and we can build out the logic to be able to say, okay, the active speaker is somebody who isn't on this whitelist, so mute them, or something like that, right? So that's where you can build these automatic rules and conditions and build some really complex interfaces, as you've seen before, that are bidirectional communication, but actually are creating those input-output relationships. Whereas Companion is going to bring that to you, but it needs you to sort of be the bridge between the output and the input.
Uh-huh.
So it's an architectural thing.
Does it add any more load? Let's stick with these instance feedback examples. You have a page and the buttons light up because they're talking. You have the next page of exactly the same people, their buttons light up because their hands are raised, and a next page, and so on. What my question is there any more load that we're putting on the system to have these duplicate pages of exactly the same folks in the meeting, but I want to, when this one lights up, I want to press it and it does this, but on this page, when I press it, it does that. Is there any extra load that we have to be concerned with at all?
Well, I can peek a little bit behind the curtain on that one and say that the way that instances in general and dynamic variables work inside of Companion is that they store all the data all the time. So it is just as, from our modules perspective, it is just as complex for you to have one page with one element as it is for you to have 15 pages with 15 different things going on. We have to store all of it anyway, because we have to support the dynamic variables so that if you were to pull them, it would get that property. So we have to maintain this array of data no matter what. Now, what I can't speak to is what is the impact on like the GUI and like the core processing threads of Companion if you have multiple pages with different parameters going on. I don't know if they call pages and activities that you're not looking at, but our module is constantly updating with all the information. But I don't know how the other parts of Companion do or do not interact with that. So half answer, but that's what I know.
Sure. Robert?
Yeah, Andy, I just wanted to tell you that you've resolved one of my biggest problems when it comes to interpreting on Zoom, because when you have two people, and you usually have two people who are interpreting on the same channel, but they hand over, one speaks, the other waits and rests. And when you've got a group of, say, 6 to 10 languages, then you've got 12 interpreters, and to track that is amazing. And what usually happens is when you see that two people are speaking at the same time, you move your mouse over to mute one, the interpreter mutes it, the whole list changes, and you mute one of the interpreters that are actually alone on the channel, and you mess everything up.
That's what's so frustrating
that guy
about that
disappears.
window. It just keeps relisting itself and changing on you.
It's the biggest nightmare that I've had. So you've just resolved that. Thank you.
No, of course, I'm happy to hear that. It's a use case, that I hadn't even thought of when I wrote the app, right? But is totally valid, and I totally see why that would help you. So that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And yeah, from here, I mean, what you would do if you wanted to build anything you wanted, you would just look at all the different actions that are supported. So I'll show you just quickly on a drop-down list, like press actions. We've got just under the audio video tab alone, we have video on off, toggle video, mute audio, unmute audio, toggle audio, unmute all, enable users unmute, like all these different things that are related. Our API is covered through now drop-down lists and all of that. You don't have to understand what OSC command is even being sent here. You just have to find it, from a drop-down list. And that's what I love so much about this, is that you can just start searching. You can say, okay, I want to chat somebody today, and I want this button to spotlight, and then tell you, hey, we spotlit you, right? So selection user 0, you got spotlit, something like that. And then you hit the button and spotlights them and it notifies them, right? So you can build whatever you want, and that's what's so fun about Companion, is that super, super flexible that way. Now, if you wanted to go and do something completely different that wasn't available in our instance, you can do that through generic OSC. That's sort of the old way of doing things, is that because we are an OSC API, if you know how to use our API, you can call anything in our API and you can call it out yourself. Benefits of doing that is that you can do literally anything you want. The downside of doing it is you have to know how, and you can't utilize dynamic variables, because there's no system there. It's very elegant, it's very light, there's nothing going on in the background, right? It's super efficient, but you have to know what you're doing, and you don't get your handheld necessarily through a lot of it. So just things to be aware of if you were to go that route, but it is something that we do support if you need to do that.
You led me to another question,
yes,
which is, do we have the group eject yet? Can we eject all attendees yet?
That's what we're working on in 4.0.5. That's something that ZoomOSC has to make a change on in order to get that to work. And we don't even know it's unknown yet whether that will actually work. It has to do with Zoom having an undocumented timeout on how many times you can eject somebody in a row. And so our all command is getting the first person immediately, and then it's erroring on the rest of them internally. But it's sending back success. It's saying, hey, we did it. And we're like, okay, great, you did it. And then it doesn't do it. So it's just those Zoom SDK things, but we are looking into it. It should be in the next release. If it is possible to be done, it'll be in the next release.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, I see you have a hand.
Yeah, I had a question about when you're building out all the buttons. So for a moment, when you were working on that earlier, it looked like you were dragging buttons and they were, so in the screen where you've got the button layout, and then you went to the add new button, you selected one of the blue options, and then it looked like you had all of our names already showing up there. So it looks like you pre-programmed where it's instance 1, instance 2, instance 3, instance 4, all the way up through a certain number. Is that right?
That's right. It goes up to 32.
Okay. So if, let's say I knew I was going to have a meeting where I had 75 people taking part, and so I was going to build multiple pages. Is there any way where I have the ability to more easily than going in and on page 2, 3, and 4, manually changing the, sorry, so 2 questions. Is there a way to simplify doing additional pages where it's going to increment the number for the instance so that it will work that way? Is that at all programmatically possible?
So yes and no. No, but we found a way around it. So the way that we're going to fix this is by shipping configs inside of our instance. So we'll pre-populate them up to 1,000 by just going in the XML and actually writing it in there. So we'll do it programmatically for you. Now, it's not in this particular build, but we'll go out and create 1,000 buttons inside of a text editor, and then you'll be able to pull that in programmatically. So that would be how you could do that. I will also say that we do those for people all the time. So if you are like, I just need this built, we'll happily go in and do it because we can do it quickly in the text editor for you.
Okay. And then another, so is it set up so that when you are editing a button, so you've got like the string for the name, which pulls in the name based upon the instance, the user's instance. And then for any of those instructions that you're adding into it, is it automatically pulling in, okay, if it's user number 3, then when you add a specific instruction to it, it knows that it's keying off of user number 3. We don't have to manually configure that.
So you do, because you have the option to do some exotic things if you wanted to. So let's look again at one of these buttons here, and I'll show you where that's all selected. So again, the preset ships it for you, but if you were to make this button yourself from scratch, you have to go, I think in this 1, 2, 3, you have 4 different places where you have to identify the user.
Right. So, and so you're saying in the new configuration, or in this current configuration, it will know that it's user 2 for that specific button.
This button will, because it's one of our preset buttons. But if you were to make this from scratch, you would have to identify the global variable here. You would have to identify the list index user here, and you would have to identify them in the feedback area here.
Right.
So that would be, so we did it for you because it's a pain. But
I built a couple out, not realizing I could. Right, I think it's before you have all the newer stuff in there. So I've done it. I'm just looking for the easier way to do it, which you have. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So these will be shipping in the preset. And again, if you want this specific build, just go to the nightly builds a companion and grab it, and it's all in there. So you can pull those in if you would like to start working off of that.
Hey, Andy.
Yes.
You have quite a few new people here. And I was wondering if you could explain some of the differences between your list index, your target index, your gallery index.
Yeah, absolutely. So ZoomOSC has this concept of target types. Target types are a way to reference a person. So unlike a lot of other apps, like if you used ATEM-OSC or something like that, they have a list of commands you can do. And if you send it that command, it'll do that thing. If you want to cut to that input, you can, ATEM and then cut, and then you go to that input, right? Unfortunately, we are not that lucky in ZoomOSC world because we have users, right? And users have different names, and they can come in and out, and they can come and go, and there's all sorts of different ways that you might want to identify them. You might know their names, in which case you would type a command that was, /zoom/username. You know what? Let me open up a text editor here and show you this because it's easier shown than said, I think. Let's look at this. So target types, right? So if I were to write a command to spotlight somebody in our API, I would type /zoom/username/add spot if I want to do an add spotlight. And then I would put in the name of the person here. So maybe it's Ray. There you go. So that would be the command that you have to hit our API with our OSC command there. But what's cool about ZoomOSC is that this middle part here can change. It doesn't have to be identified by their username. Maybe it's going to be gallery index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Your gallery index 5. So I could do gal index. And then instead of putting your name there, I could put a 5. And that would do the same exact thing, but it uses a different piece of information we have about you. So if we just care about spotlighting the person in the 5th position, that's how I would do it if I didn't know who you were, right? So that's gallery index and username, right? But there's this whole concept of a target ID. We did a whole test kitchen on target ID, so I definitely recommend going back to look at it. The idea of a target ID is that I just have a file on disk. It's called the target list. And it's basically a map from usernames to numbers. And so when you build out your stream deck, you build it out with numbers because those will always be the same. And then you can go out to disk and you can change that text file. And that's like your soft patch to be able to repatch people on the fly. So you can think of the target list like that. Now we also have gallery position, which is a string on the Mac. So if you are using this on Mac OS, you can do gallery position. I think that is right. And then it would be a comma separated address. That'd be like over 1, down 1. And that would be Aaron on my screen. That would spotlight Aaron. So it might be gal position. Check the API. I'll show you how to do that. But so we have like 5 or 6 of these different target types that can go in this area to identify people. So what does that mean for companion users? Well, if you're not writing commands, you do have to know what these are the target types here, right? So target index, gallery position, me, selection, list index, specify username, all that stuff. These are basically drop-down list versions of what goes in our API. And it actually has more than our API even handles because some of these are internal to companion, like selection or things like that. Those are internal. So when you've selected somebody, you want to get them, you basically are building a list and then referencing the list. So that's what these, so target index, gallery position. Me is if you wanted to act on yourself. If I want a button that always spotlights myself and always unmutes me, I could do that. I could just have me as the identifier and then have no arguments whatsoever. And then you have, all the names of the people here in the call. They're all listed on the drop-down list here too that you can grab them from. So that's a great question, and I could spend a lot more time on it, and I have in other videos. So it would be good to look at them. But Ray, it's a great point. If you're first looking at ZoomOSC and you're like, what is a gallery index? What is that? It's just another way of identifying a user.
And when you just did that demo, I'm sorry if I might interrupt one more time real quick. When you did that demo, somebody had one of those diamond characters in their name. Mm-hmm. Is Companion now recognizing that since it's seeing the diamond pattern and you're able to get it in there? Is that recognizable at this point? I actually don't know. That's one of those things I have to check with Ashley on because we have been pushing for non-ASCII characters to be included, even though they're not part of the OSC spec. Because usernames are usernames and people should identify their name as the way that they're supposed to. We need that to be part of the extended spec. So we've been working with them on that. So I don't know if this build has it. Maybe it does. I just haven't tested it yet.
So maybe this is a related point. If the participants have joined through a registered registration, that means they'll be clicking on a link that's got their token in it, and that will bring them in as them. Does that give us any predefined identifier if they are registered? Can we lock onto them that way?
So that would be using their Zoom ID parameter, which is another parameter or target type that you can use in ZoomOSC. Now, it's not everybody has a Zoom ID whether they registered or not. But what's cool is when you start using tokens and you have renaming disabled, you can enforce that they're always going to join with a certain name. So that can be a really clever way if you want your panel to always be named a certain way and you have them joined by a token. ZoomOSC has just as easy a time locking onto them as they do a regular user. Tom, do you have another question?
Yeah. How do we access the beta builds for BitFocus Companion?
Absolutely. Let me show you. All right. Back to vMix. Go to bitfocus.io. I'm going to go to the users area, and I'm going to log in. All right. I've logged in. So
you don't want to share your login with us?
Saw that coming. You want to go over on the bottom right to beta builds. It's underneath. It's kind of underneath this area here. It's kind of hard to see, but beta builds is over here, and it's going to open a new tab. And here are all the beta builds.
Okay,
the last
so
one was.
It's not that it's I'm sorry. It's not that it's the ZoomOSC that's like that specifically. It's the entire companion that we do the beta build of.
That's correct. Yeah. So companion is really weird when it comes to how it's built. All of the modules are packed inside of companion itself. So we don't actually distribute anything from Liminal's end. We just contribute to the open source repo, and they build that every couple hours, and then they put the build on here. So all the modules they're called modules, but they're not modular. They're part of the system. So we can't update one piece without the rest of Companion being updated. So their solution is just to be crazy about updating this thing every couple hours. So anytime any developer pushes a change, they make a new build and they publish it here. And I'm sure they have a build script that runs all of this with the notes. But you'll see that I think 12 days ago or so in the notes, you'll see that we updated this for supporting ZoomISO, which we released on that day. Any build that follows that will have the ZoomISO commands in it. But you can see the change log alongside. And again, it's like every couple hours, 24 hours ago, 23 hours ago, 2 builds in the last hour. So right. A lot of very, very frequent updates. So it's usually the case that once we put something in that Git repo, within an hour or so, it's there.
So another question, I'm running this off of a Companion Pi.
Got it.
Do you know if there's any scripts out there that I could just run through terminal?
To update?
Yeah, on the beta build.
Jonas, can you help me out? I don't know.
Last time I checked, it was pretty hard to do.
Okay.
The updates.
Okay.
And I think they also support a non-stable version on the normal Companion Pi. So you might already have those.
All right, I will. I'll do the. I'll figure it out. Just thought I'd try and see if I could cheat.
Yeah, no. Hopefully you can. I don't have anything special on that one for you. Companion is one of those things where we are developing the Companion module as a first party, right. But it's a double-edged sword because we have control of some things, but not control of a lot of things. What's funny though is that we have some weird leverage because this is an extremely popular instance on Companion, which is cool. But it's also the most complicated one. So if you look at the size, the amount of logic that happens inside of because most of these are maybe you have a dynamic variable, but it's dynamic in the sense that it figures out how your thing is configured and posts it there, and then you hit a button, it does an action, right? We have this internal logic systems okay, there's 5 ways to identify this user, hash the right one to there, and then create an OSC command and send it through the network port, and it's this whole big thing going on inside of it. It's a huge module. Right. It's by far the most complex module on Companion. But that also means that when I have a problem, I can usually get something taken care of if there's problems in the architecture. So it's a cool project. Yeah.
Mute myself.
Awesome. Cool. So if there aren't any other questions on that stuff, maybe we should stay on the subject of Companion, but pivot a little bit and look at integrating with ZoomISO, so you can see how this kind of looks when it's all put together. So for those of you who aren't familiar, about 2 weeks ago, we launched a product called ZoomISO, and it is sort of a cousin to ZoomOSC in the sense that it's everything I just showed you still applies, but it allows you to export the users of that meeting as NDI or Siphon. So if you're going out to something like vMix and you want 9 video feeds of users coming in at 720p and you want to make super sources and all of that, this is an app that lets you do that. And because it's a cousin app to ZoomOSC, it has OSC commands in it, and one of those is the output ISO command, and that allows you to basically use the app like a matrix. Find users in the call, route them to outputs, pull them into vMix, and then with Companion, you can literally make a matrix. And so that's what I spent some time on the past couple of days, and I'll show you kind of what the result of that was. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go back to that vMix video, and I'm going to go ahead and disable my current ZoomOSC instance that we were just using. I'm going to re-enable my ZoomISO instance, and I'll give that a second to figure itself out. Go up to, which page was I on before? All right, let me go over here. Back to buttons, page 1. Okay, so this is similar. I connected to a completely different computer that's running ZoomISO right now, but you see it's rolling over right now as it updates itself. But I have, and Companion will get upset about this as I'm doing this, because I've sent it some requests here, and this is a beta build, and this is one of the things about being a beta build, that I hit a button sometimes it don't show me what's going on. Anyway, so these buttons are very similar in layout to what we were looking at earlier together. It's a selection, and then on the right hand side this is the output ISO command. So just like spotlighting, this is routing them to an NDI or siphon output. So, and then I also have it graduate in vMix that input to the preview bus. So I'll show you what that looks like inside of vMix here. If I bring that over and sort of just take it on faith that I'm using Companion here and not cheating somehow. But I'm going to start clicking on some names on my Stream Deck. And actually, I'll show you one of them so you can get the idea of what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to go over back to page 1. And I'm going to find somebody with video on. So I'll take, let me see, who do I have here? That would be good. Let me see. I only get so many names on the 32 button. I didn't build the second page yet, so that's on me. Rupert, I'll get you. So I'm going to put you on ISO 1. So what you saw there is I hit the button and turned green, and then I hit ISO 1 and it routed to that output. So let me show you what happens there. So in vMix, I have 4 NDI sources available. So I'm just going to start hitting names and routing them to inputs. So now I just put David in input 2 and graduated it to preview. Kurt, I'm going to take you and put you on input 3, graduate you to preview. And who else do I have on my button pad here? Anyone else with video on? Well, I could take somebody with video off as well. I'll show you what that does. Oh, there we go. Robert, you did have video on. Great. So now I have 4 videos. And what's cool about this is now that because we're in vMix, if I were to cut over to program here and start to use super sources, we can actually utilize the super source engine. So I can go from a 4 to a 3 and a 3 to a 2 and all sorts of stuff here. So this is the reason why people do this, is that they can then treat them as isolated inputs and sources in here. And so that's the idea of what that's all about. So now if I want to change who is routed to the super source, I can easily do that. I can just say, all right, I want to take, let's see, who else do I have here? I could take somebody like that. I can put, all right, so this person, so Gavin doesn't have video on, but I just blocked out a cell in the view there. I could take Tom to video 2. And I just put Tom in box 2 there instead. So you can select, and then I can put, if I want to double up on David, I could put David back there, and you can just select these on the fly. So that's the idea of the system, is that you can just, again, just by clicking names, I'm just choosing people here. So all I did there was hit David, hit ISO 2, and then it created an NDI out, or it routed David to an existing NDI output, and it cut it instantly. So if you want to see how fast that can be, I'm just going to keep switching input 2 between, I'll do double Rupert and David because they're next to each other on the key. So I'm going to go Rupert to 2, David to 2, Rupert to 2, David to 2. And if you count a little bit of zoom delay in there, that on my screen, that's instant. So you're instantly cutting these sources, versus like with a Zoom room, if you do this, it takes about 5 seconds to roll over to the other source. With ZoomISO, it's designed to be instant cutting, so you can actually reuse these. So again, the net benefit at the end of the day is that you have 32 people, but you can basically treat as though you had all of them ingested into Zoom, even though you only got 4 of them right now. But you could have up to 9 of them independently at 720p, 5 of them at 1080p, so on and so forth. Unlimited number at 360p, really however you want to build it out. So there's a whole lot of stuff you can do there. I could speak about this for hours, but I won't. But the idea, and because I actually already did, because I shot 13 videos yesterday about it, and so you'll get to watch those. But that's the idea of what ZoomISO can do with the Stream Deck, is you just build this profile out and build your ISO output buttons, and just as we were pinning people before, we're just selecting people and routing them, and selecting people and routing them. So it'll be a lot of fun. So that's how it can scale.
Are those feeds primed as 1080 in preview? So when you're switching, Zoom's not having to bump up the resolution?
As soon as you assign them, they go right to that resolution. So if we look at, let me turn on Scan Converter here if I don't have it on already, and I'll show you what it looks like on the Mac so that you can see what's actually happening. Let me go grab that source here. That's going to be Macintosh Mac Scan Convert. Okay, and then cut that.
I can probably share my screen faster.
Oh, but can you? Because I got it.
Oh, you got it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
That was
quick on the trigger. So let me grab some junk and get that out of the way here. So ZoomISO settings out of the way. So Rupert, you see yourself in the bottom left there. That's me. That is ZoomISO's window where it puts you. And this is a 4K display, so you're about 1/4 of the screen there, so that's a 1080. So if I wanted to route David there, let me do David to, I don't know which input you're on. There, David's on, you're on 1 now. So I can switch that, and what it's doing is it's basically asking Zoom to put a different video in that space. Now you're looking at a 4K scan convert, so the frame rate probably looks pretty bad, but on my screen it's pretty smooth. So I'm just switching what goes into that box. Now if I look at all available windows, if we go to show all windows, you'll see that I actually have a bunch of other windows that are stacked behind that. ZoomISO is sort of stacking them, and you can drag them and work with them independently. But it's kind of cool to look at it in this view, because you can see what it's actually doing behind the scenes. There is just routing different people into different places and all that. So so that's kind of the idea of it. Now if I want to change the size, as you were discussing there, on the left hand side of the app, or sorry, on the left hand side of the screen, with left nothing, everything's on the right here. On this drop down list here, I can select the size of that input. So if I say, all right, by default I want these to go to 720p, now you're about 1/8 of the screen. I go down to 180p, and now you're really small on screen, 360p, so on and so forth. I can bump these around at will. And I can also set them on a per input basis. So if I wanted to, 2 360p outputs and then 2 720 and a 1080. And then again, I look at show all windows. You'll see that the windows are different sizes.
And that's scaling in Zoom, or is that scaling in
so we are not
ZoomISO?
We're not scaling the output unless Zoom is not delivering the requested output. So what we basically do is we draw a box and we say, Zoom, put a video in it, and Zoom will try to put a video in that box that is the resolution that we requested. However, if support didn't enable 1080p on the call, or if it's a 360p meeting or something like that and HG isn't supported, what we will never do is put black borders on it. So it won't be inlaid in a frame. So we'll upsample in that case, and it'll basically just size up the image so that your output is always the requested output, which we think is pretty important for a bunch of reasons that you're probably aware of, Aaron. But
Agreed.
So if you ask for a 1080 output, you will always get a 1080 output, and we have asked Zoom to put a 1080 video in that box. If they don't comply, we scale it up so it is 1080, but it'll be 360 upscaled to 1080 depending on your meeting and stuff like that. But it'll always be that resolution.
What about if somebody's pillar boxed, or they've got some odd aspect ratio in their incoming video?
Well, Zoom will standardize it to 16:9 on the desktop client. So if they're pillar box, they will actually have pillars on the side of that, because that's their video contribution, right? If you're 4:3 on a mobile and you're coming in, you're going to have the 16:9 pillar boxes on the side. But that's what Zoom thinks your video is at that point. It actually, once it gets up to the reflector, it's a 16:9 video.
So those pillar boxes are in the video signal. That's not.
They are. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hasmukh?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. Oh, it's creepy to see the mute icon still in place, but have your voice coming through because it's from the other.
Yeah, I updated to Big Sur my MacBook Pro, and it broke my audio chain, so I'm talking to you on my iPhone. You brought that ZoomISO and NDI output into vMix. Which other, being on a Mac, and Zoom supports, you have now Zoom NDI. Is that how you would use the two together with Zoom ISO and Zoom itself?
So you don't have to run Zoom Rooms, and you don't have to run the Zoom client. It's an application that we distribute that handles the whole thing inside of itself. So that you don't need any other apps to run with it. Now, if you want to run everything inside of the Mac, you can use something like Memo Live, or you can use the Wirecast distribution for Mac. And I actually just recorded 10 different apps yesterday, a bunch of them on Mac OS, and we'll have those tutorials coming out in about a week or two, where I show you how do you get the video into Memo, how do you get it into Wirecast. And what's cool about it is if you keep it in the Mac, you can use Siphon. And Siphon is super low latency, super low overhead. So you'll be able to do even better. Like your CPU will be less driven and all that kind of stuff when you use Siphon inside the Mac. So you will be able to do even more than you can do via NDI when you do it via Siphon. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, because one of the benefits is obviously the ability to do what you showed us, the super source, and feed the ISOs into a particular super source.
Yes. So that's another thing that you can do, is because if you're using Companion, you have all of the companion actions for vMix you can create a super source, put certain people in those super sources, and then tell ZoomISO what to put in those feeds. So you could conceivably, you could do something like select 3 people and then hit a button, and then it creates a super source of those 3 inside of vMix. So that could be a lot of fun.
Got you. Thanks, Andy.
Of course, anytime.
And Andy, you can output straight to copper, be it SDI or like a...
That's right. So if you want to
HDMI.
get out to physical infrastructure, there are a couple of ways to do it. The first way is if you're going to go out to SDI, you run an app called Black Siphon. What Black Siphon will do is it'll take the video that's inside of ZoomISO and it'll write it to a deck link. And so, or an Ultra Studio or whatever Blackmagic hardware that you have that gets you out to copper infrastructure. So in this computer, I have a decklink quad. So I have 8 SDI outputs. So I could create 8 720p feeds, let's say. And then in Black Siphon, I would just select decklink port here, siphon source here, and I would just match them all up. I can choose embedded audio, all that stuff. And then that'll go out into the SDI architecture. If you want to go out to HDMI directly, you're going to do that through the display output ports. So a bunch of options there. If you have Thunderbolt ports and you have HDMI dongles, you can start to use them. Basically, if macOS can treat it as a display, ZoomISO can treat it as an output. You just turn off displays have separate spaces inside of your Mac, get rid of the top carousel, you can write full screen to that output. So if you've got a MacBook Pro that you can drive, 4 Thunderbolt dongles out from, and you got 4 outputs there right to HDMI and into an ATEM, you could do that. If you're using an M1 and you don't have all those Thunderbolt ports available, you can use something like DisplayLink. Again, we're only driving 1080p outputs because Zoom is only going to deliver 1080p maximum anyway, right, for participants' video. So if you use DisplayLink, you can take the 6K output that can come out there and you can split it up into, usually it's about, you have some loss to overhead, so you get about 2 1080 outputs that you can use with DisplayLink adapters. So those could sit on the back of an M1, and now you have 4 outputs there from the 2 Thunderbolt ports that are there, or more, depending on the DisplayLink adapter that you purchase. So I was talking a bit about that in the general chat of office hours last night, but basically there's always a way to do it. Just depends on what your budget is and what hardware you have and what you're trying to get to. But physical displays or deck links or anything else, I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that you could do it if you don't want to use NDI and you want to get out to hardware quickly in one hop. So that's another, and that's why anytime somebody posts like, oh, should I use an NDI to SDI converter, I like tear my hair out, because it's like, no, we built all these other ways, so you don't have to spend $2,000 on one of those. Like, just do this. So yeah, that's the thinking there.
The NDI route would be more if you're producing in the cloud, or not necessarily the route, but that's kind of the way to get things around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And once we have a Windows version, we'll be dangerous in the cloud as well. There'll be a storm up there, David. Awesome. Caden, I see you have your hand raised. What's up?
Hi, yes, man. Just wanted to ask, so we're testing ZoomISO today a bit into a TriCaster 860, and the displays on the Mac screen came through perfectly, but when we moved them over to the to our second display monitor, the sources were cropped. Now, I did hear you say on the call last week that if you select it on the actual app, that it shouldn't crop it, but we did select the sources on your app, but it was still cropping it coming into the TriCaster. I was just wondering if you could.
Yeah, I can talk you through a little bit of that. So, are you seeing a crop evenly on both sides or just on one side of the output?
Just from the bottom of the output.
Okay, so I'm willing to bet that what's happening is that you're probably on. Are you on Big Sur?
No,
you're not. So okay, so that's right. So what I'm expecting then is, do you have displays have separate spaces disabled?
I'm actually not sure, if I'm honest with you.
So if you go to mission control, so this is the thing. So what's probably happening is when you select that output display, the top menu bar is pushing our input down and causing a black line to appear because it's not the primary display and it's not Big Sur. Big Sur has a whole different way of dealing with it. But on older macOS versions, you have to go in and you have to go to mission control and disable the option called displays have separate spaces. And then what you need to do is you need to go to ZoomISO and say full screen output to that display, and it will actually overtake the top area there. And then because it's all drawing on screen together, the black bar should go away. But if it doesn't, definitely shoot us an email, because there's a bunch of steps we can talk you through about different like PPIs on the different displays and how that can affect things. We have a lot of simplifications and fixes and in-app controls coming in the next update, but we can talk you through how to get your Mac set up for a bunch of those if you shoot us an email.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Robert, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'm going to sound like a broken record with interpretation again, but with the OSC, with the NDIs, can you choose or select the language channel that you want to go with the person that you've highlighted or selected?
So not in our app. We don't have the option to. Well, I'll put it. We have all the same options that the Zoom app has, but we haven't exposed any of the interpretation features to OSC. So if you can do it through the main app, you'll be able to assign that output line. And what you could do is if you're going out to Copper, or you're going out to, we're going to have an ASIO thing in the future, hopefully. What you could do is you could take the interpreter's audio and assign it to the video channel for the speaker who is speaking in a different language. And you can marry those as your output. So that could be something to consider.
Okay. Okay. Is it something to do with the SDK? Because I know the Zoom SDK doesn't support some selecting interpretation channels.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I just don't have a way to reach it or a way to read it even. So
I know. Okay. Okay. With you.
Marcus?
Hey, Andy. Fantastic job with those apps. I really love them. I just wanted to get an idea of, I think a couple of office hours ago, we spoke about ISO audio. Is there any progress on that, and does the app at the moment send the consolidated audio, or does it send any audio?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. So the app today does not send any audio. You'd have to go out to Loopback or Black Hole or something like that, and then figure out where you wanted to route that to. If you go to Black Hole and you're using SDI, you'd select on the SDI sources Black Hole as well, and then you'd be able to receive the muxed audio and all your SDI output lines. You could use NDI, and you could select Black Hole there, and then it could create an NDI output for you with the audio there. We are going to add muxed audio to all the outputs as a configurable setting inside of the app in the next update, so that will be coming. So just keep an eye out for that. For individual audio, we do have a roadmap for getting to individual audio. It requires a couple of changes on Zoom's side, though. We have to be able to tie into the new consent architecture that they've built for allowing us to do that. So once they have built that, and we can then, as developers, bring that in, we should be able to pull in that, and then we can give you individual audio channels as well. So it is on the roadmap. I have to wait for Zoom to turn something on, and then I can export individual audio.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's a big one, because once we have that, your mixing workflows can change completely. Like that'll be, and the thing is, Zoom did it for themselves to get rooms ready, and now we just have to let them allow developers to tie into that.
Yeah, I saw that. I used Rooms on a production over the weekend, and it worked really well. So I think the audio is a huge step for ZoomISO.
Yes, definitely agree. Definitely agree. It's with Rooms, we built ZoomISO with the NDI features of Rooms in mind, and we coordinated with Zoom to make sure that the apps would have the ability to coexist together without competing, and we think that we're really excited about what they've offered, and likewise they're offering things to us to be able to make our app the production output app, and their app can be the the business center and the buildings and all of that, and the conference rooms and that kind of architecture. So awesome.
Have you done any tests in the cloud with ZoomISO?
So because of the troubles of running Macs in the cloud, or not the troubles of it, but rather just the expense of it, we haven't tested it thoroughly, because we know that it's difficult for end users to emulate that. So we are, though, working on a Windows version of ZoomISO, and that'll run in the cloud. ZoomOSC runs today in the cloud, so we're optimistic that we can do it. Jonas, did you have any thoughts on that? Because I know you're up there in the cloud all the time, head in the clouds.
Well, if you check my output, that's called Jonas output. That's all running in the cloud right now. And we are not able to use a ZoomISO yet. As soon as Andy brings out a Windows version, not that I'm waiting for that. We are we need to use Zoom Rooms right now. And somebody just broke my script. But what I'm able to do with this is like it's ZoomOSC that automatically triggers active speakers, so the person comes in front and lower thirds and all that. It all works beautifully in the cloud. So let's hope we'll get it soon with ISO audio.
Yep. As soon as Zoom turns the key, I'll be able to push that out. But I know the cloud's a big workflow, and we believe in it. So no convincing needed. I just have to make it happen.
Is there a way to make it so that if let's say you have a bunch of things in ZoomISO, somebody turns off their camera, I want to flip it away so that it's just automatically, so I don't end up with a bunch of, or I want to, change my view, or, cause a command and switcher or something to get rid of it.
Yes, so absolutely. And I know Jonas is, I think, doing that right now even.
Yeah, so we are listening to the video off command from ZoomOSC, and it's not in the version yet, but we'll show a slide that just like says for user not found in the design that we know. But we could also like switch to something else, and for an ATEM you could also like then make the super source smaller via ATEM-OSC and whatever magic you like in between. I like code in Node.js, some like Isadora. It's totally possible.
Sure. Okay.
Now you do require another app to make the connection though. So you can't right now in ZoomOSC, you can't say like in some part of our UI when you see
No, I didn't think so.
At the third party level, you can absolutely do it.
Yeah.
You have to sit more centered in my chair so I look good on Jonas's output. All right, awesome. So that's what we were doing on the ZoomISO side of things. As I said, we'll have another update for that app coming out hopefully in a couple of weeks. It'll be a busy summer in terms of updates for it, because we're continuing to iterate and find things and talk to certain hardware manufacturers of the magical variety about how they might want to integrate, but I won't say any more on that just yet.
And are there any minimum hardware requirements for testing ISO out? Like, what's the oldest piece of Mac?
Yeah, so I've tried it on a 2015 MacBook Air. I can get like 2 outputs, so it's not phenomenal, but like it can happen. There are some users have reported that like it's not so much the model, but there are some users who have issues, but they also have them with regular NDIs. It's a weird thing where it's like our documentation basically recommends that you use a Mac from the last 3 years that's either in the Pro lineup, the Mini lineup, or the Pro or the Mac Pro, right? So if you use something in the last 3 years, most of those should be able to do the job. Go farther back than that, mileage may vary, but I had a user the other day tell me they were running this on a 2014 MacBook Pro and they had 8 720p outputs cooking, and I was like, all right, that's cool. So it's a little elusive to me exactly what the specific minimum specs are, because we validated internally on all 3 years of the past Mac offerings, but to go past that, there seems to be some hit or miss ones there, but some work really well unexpectedly, so something to be aware of. Caden?
I have a 2012 MacBook
Oh, nice.
Pro, and I was using it. It was working fine, and I had 4 outputs at 720.
That's awesome.
And the trial will work out of the box just watermarked, right?
That's right. Yeah. So you can do as many outputs as you want. There's no limit that we impose on outputs. So you can just do as much as you want, and then they're watermarked, and then you take the watermark off with the license.
So a Mac in AWS is $25 a day. Is that right? So I don't know. It seems like you could do it in the cloud. Just cost you $25 a day.
It's not only that you have to rent it for a day and how expensive it is, it's also how not built it is for that. Like it's significantly harder to work with that because of networking issues and virtualization issues, it's harder to get a Mac into your VPC, and all the people that tried it till now told me don't do it. So I looked into it, and yeah, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's fair.
Before I would do that, I would use ZoomISO locally and some kind of SRT streamer to get it all up there. Or Zoom NDI.
And that was kind of another question. So you could do the NDI outs on the ground and stream them up
Bird
into
Dog
the cloud
or something like that to get it up there. You could absolutely do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Caden?
So if I can just stick to the hardware topic, would for the 720 feeds, would a 1 gig network port be good enough for that?
Yes, absolutely. So at 1080, we're using the scan convert specs for NDI, not the camera specs. So at 1080, 30 FPS, we're using 40 to 50 megabit. At 720p, we're using about half of that. So you'll be well within a gigabit if you do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah, we figured it's a 6 megabit stream coming from Zoom. So for us to pump it out at 150 megabits would be a little obsessive, we think. So. But we're still doing like 10 times. So it's still, but that's how it is.
Back to the user, the client, ZoomOSC and Companion. Is there a way to get video feedback to the buttons? Like I thought I've seen somebody where they have representation of the camera feed or something back to buttons.
Yes, but not with Companion. That's where you use Universe Control, and Universe will let you literally put NDI onto the buttons of your Stream Deck, which is so cool. But it's not done in Companion.
Got it.
Do you have an integration with Central Control to do that?
I talk to Joe pretty often, and we gave him some developer keys to work on a Central Control ZoomOSC integration. I don't know what the latest is on terms of where he's at on that process, but we definitely have given him that, and we've had some back and forth conversations about our API, and I know he's working on a really, really cool update to Central Control, and I think we're going to be part of that. So, but I can't speak for him too much on that, but we are looking at it.
Yeah, and as a developer, ZoomOSC is cool because it gives you all kind of cool events that you can trigger stuff on, like we do right now.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun. It was it's an API at the end of the day. We distribute stuff that tries to make APIs accessible to people by making presets and all that other stuff. But at the end of the day, ZoomOSC as an app is an API to Zoom, and it's just a more flexible one. It's designed for production systems.
So Jonas, your multi-box that's up there as output is doing the grow and and lower third on the fly? I don't know if we can pin
that's
that
all
just to...
automatically. Like, I mean, I am on comms with a person that's in the cloud to fix the videos, but it's all done automatically, and it's not working for me again. ZoomOSC hates me. It works with everyone, just not with me.
Well, it's probably because it's /me when it's sending your own command and not /user.
No, I'm not coming in over that.
Oh no, that's usually the one. But
yeah, so what it does is when I get the active speaker, we have a web interface that maps people to an input via their Zoom ID. So ZoomOSC tells me who is active speaker, who has his camera, and all that via the output. And then I have a script that talks to vMix directly, does the crowing boxes. If a certain timer has been surpassed, it flies in a lower third, flies it out. I can change how many people are on screen up to 8. If ZoomOSC would tell me that a screen share started, I could have, I will change it to a screen share state and all that. And theory, you can do a lot of cool stuff by just being in the native Zoom client. Like like Andy said, if you get a list of the people that are spotlighted, you can pin those automatically and then do a 4K up with them and stream it all out in 4K. If somebody would want to do that with their Zoom meetings.
Yeah, I wonder who might want to do that we happen to know over on the West Coast. So I wonder, maybe that's why I have plane tickets to Novato, California on July 21st.
Nobody wants to do 4K with Zoom. Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah. And within the NDI products like Scan Converter, there's options for overlays for VU meters and for safety. You know, does ISO support or honor that stuff, or somehow enable it? Like if you wanted to build a multi-viewer for production downstream of, you know, where you're going live.
So it's just an NDI source at the end of the day. We don't inject any NDI metadata of our own, but we do respect the ones that are set by other apps. So you can look at a tally light, you can look at, you know, any of that stuff in a multi-view. So if you pull a ZoomISO NDI source into a switcher and then you have a multi-view and you have tally overlays, it will respect those.
And what you're probably talking about is in the studio monitor, where you can enable all of those stuff. And what you could do is you could pull in ZoomISO NDI, enable whatever you want to enable, and then output that again. And what would be cool, Andy, if you set the tally status, set on like you can set it in ZoomISO to either be active speaker or video camera on, so you get the tally information. That could be useful to use in other programs.
Yeah, I've been looking at the KiloView multi-view app for Windows. That's pretty cool as far as building that kind of multi-view for NDI stuff.
Another cool one is NewTek Connect Pro, because that enables you, especially for cloud workflows, which is the most amazing thing. You put that in a cloud instance, and you can build your own multi-views that are streamed down over the browser at that point. So as soon as ZoomISO is in the cloud, I'll put all my ZoomISO clients in the cloud, have NewTek Connect Pro, and just hand out a URL to producers, and they can create their own multi-view, select where each source should go and all that. It's pretty amazing.
And like I said, we'll be NDI 5 compliant as soon as the SDK is available. So then you have all of those options also available to you, which will be a lot of fun. So
that's this month, right?
What is this month? I don't know anymore because it was
exactly.
But
will there be ZoomISO version that will stay on NDI 4?
Well, we won't deprecate. I mean, we'll deprecate in terms of documentation, but we'll have the builds will still be available with NDI 4. But
because I know a lot of system engineers right now that are especially building stuff in the cloud and all that, and we are all saying let's stay out of Zoom NDI 5 for at least 2 months. Yeah,
good to know. What we might do is we might distribute an Apple Silicon ready version that we might even compile on Apple Silicon itself, and just have that as the NDI 5 build, because we know that they'll have a better experience than what they have now, right? Can't get worse than slideshow output. So for them, we'll have a build, and then we'll keep NDI 4, and it just depends on how. Yeah, I don't know anything about NDI 5 because they haven't released anything about it to developers. We have our conference in a week or so with so we'll learn about that at that point, and then ask me next Thursday.
Thanks for everything. I gotta go, but you guys have a good day.
Yeah, you too, Aaron. Take care.
Here,
Yeah,
I've been
probably gonna have to head out at 5 as well, Jeff. But
been messing with my new iPad Pro to see, like, I remember the other day on office hours, somebody asked, you know, like, what size is the gallery view and so forth. And there's actually a lot of answers to that because it's really flexible. Let's see if I can share my screen and see if it comes across right. Will it do it? It's doing the screen, but not the gallery view. Just a tab. Shucks. Well, so that's not going to show you. But if I showed you the screen here, kind of. Anyways, it's zoomable as well. I can do it. Oh, it's hard to do reaching behind.
You've got a menu up on top of things.
Yeah.
What is that, about 30 grid?
Yeah, so when it's in landscape, it can go as many as 30. When it's in landscape, you can zoom in twice, so it goes to 20. And one more time will take you to 12. And so I'll bring that back. And then if you go portrait, you just have one zoom step. So you got 28 or 8. Goes from 28 to 8. So kind of cool. Kind of pretty rich environment. Has the scroll tabs, like when you have active speaker, the scroll tab of the gallery view and so forth. So looks sharp. It's really good. Anyways, that was just off topic, but
no, that's awesome.
And that's the native iOS Zoom client on that.
Yeah, this is the Zoom client on the iPad Pro. Yeah, this is the one with the M1 chip in it. Super speedy, super light. That's for sure. Well, Andy, this was a really full day.
Yes, it was.
A lot of content, a lot of audience.
My voice is hoarse. I'm gonna have to.
Yeah. No, this will be the one for the archives. We've had 3 to 5 to 6 on the Facebook feeds, and definitely be one worth going back and watching. A lot of great data and stuff to learn. So much. The one time, real quick, let me make sure I'm turned down here. I don't hear myself. I am. The it's a one-time purchase, right, for ZoomISO.
That's right.
And so versus. I mean, if we compared a few things, it's not to say we're better than you. I think they have two distinctly, different, use cases and audiences. But the Zoom NDI for Zoom rooms, right, is a minimum of a monthly expense of like $50 for one Zoom room. But with that, I think their outputs are three 1080s at the moment, having the hedge on the isolated audio also, but that won't be a forever thing. But that monthly subscription versus the one-time deal here. I've got ZoomISO installed and running on my Mac. It also accepts my ZoomOSC license, my Pro license as well. So it's just one package, one program running and supporting everything I need. And don't know, it's pretty simple and straightforward for sure. And I think you had mentioned it, and I love it, is once I put in the OSC license, it all is wrapped up into one. But if I wanted to delegate and say, hey, you run ISO today on that computer, you run OSC on that computer, I can just click the button and deactivate my OSC license from here and activate it on let's say, the tech engineer's laptop that they'll be running that on a different system. So flexible that way. Don't have to necessarily go, buy another license for the day, if you will. And so there's some good stuff there. So anyways, I'm assuming you can run them both on the same machine too, separately, right?
Yes, you can. You could run Zoom, ZoomISO, and ZoomOSC all on the same machine, and you could do that if you really want to.
More of a mess.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do that, but in theory, you could.
Concurrently?
Concurrently. Now, performance, I have.
Yeah.
I make no claims of what that experience will be. But,
Also had a Zoom room on top.
Yeah.
And then nobody did the Zoom room on it. You can't run anything else.
signage,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
To that point, what about the companion nightly builds? Is that a parallel install, or does it supersede whatever you might have?
It is a super. You will have to. Well, it depends on Mac. You can kind of play around a little bit, but generally it's a replacement. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on the latest one today. I haven't been on the beta builds for a while, but went back to it. It's been good, been solid today. And I really dig what they're doing with their interface. Their interface and their emulators. I think somebody might have been Robert earlier, talked about building, somebody asked about building, more than just a page, of all the potential, attendees or whatnot, which is not at the end of the day, it's not always a have to. It depends on really what the event is all about, because those buttons that, say, show me who is in position 1, who's in 2, who's in 3, they change as your gallery page changes, as well as people come and go. It dynamically updates. But the magic is, it was one of the reasons I started messing with my iPad, is you can, the iPad 1 is obviously a touchscreen, right? So I don't have to have necessarily a Stream Deck. It's a touchable screen. And the emulators, the web emulator, and I think they have a new one called like Mobile and Web, is pageable. And so you can just page up. And so you just have endless numbers of pages and all the buttons, and you could put in 200 pre-programmed dynamic variables, right? And they'll just, like, I think you mentioned it, Andy, they'll just be dashes. If you have 200 buttons built and you only ended up with 75 participants, you'll have 75 populated buttons with names, and the 125 will just be dashed because there's nobody there. And so it's always ready to show you who's there if they're there. So it's good stuff.
I'm gonna have to pop out. It was good seeing everybody today. If you have any questions, shoot us an email at info@liminalet.com. Hit us up in Slack, and I will see you next week. Thank you, everybody.
Take care, Andy. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Andy.
All right. I think it's probably about time. My head's pretty full. That was a lot of information, a lot of really great information, a lot of great demos as well, showing us. I mean, it's got to be one of the most feature-rich presets in Companion I've seen that they've built in there to really make it just drop dead simple. It's really the time consumption for us digging into this is just going through all those drop downs and finding what's where and seeing what all those options are. And but then knowing, if you want to code it, you can code it as well. If you want to do it that way, you can still send OSC commands, but with Companion and Stream Decks and the presets, there's just so much that can be done. Clicking and works great.
Say you had one, you were tweaking out one button that does like a million things. Could you then export that to XML, find it, and duplicate it as many times as you want, changing the values that you'd want, like the index or any of that stuff to reflect those?
Yeah, I'll let Jonas respond to that. He works with it a lot.
So yes, there's an export, but you don't want to change it. It's way too complicated.
Yeah.
But the trick that saved me from going insane in working with Companion is a Control-C, Control-V that works on a button. So if you select a button and hit Control-C, it copies it, and then you can paste it as much as you like.
But does it increment the values? Like for... It
doesn't increment the value. But that's like easy to do manually, because otherwise you need to, like, if you have 5 actions that I have for some vMix presets, it's like you have to find these 5 actions 10 times for 10 buttons. So yeah, it's
cool.
That's it. restricted. Saved me hours, days probably.
Yeah, the Control C and V. I don't. Is that in their newer builds, or has that worked for a long time?
It was always in there. Nobody knows about it.
Yeah, no one uses it.
When I
it's
found
always
it, I
that
was like,
clicking the
so amazing.
copy button, and I just click, and it's all doable. But the Control C and V that was new for me right there. So thanks for sharing that.
That goes back to like Windows 3.0.
Well, and I use copy and paste on keyboards all day long, but for some reason the companion interface doesn't invite even the thought of doing it, because they have the copy, move, delete buttons down below. So that's quite cool. But I totally get where you're coming from, David. I when I do vMix scripting, it's got to be in a script, because companion's a pain in the butt to build multi-actions on a single button, like to start a show or to end a show, all the things that have to happen. It's just adding action after action. I'm just like, screw that. Execute a script that's a text-based file in vMix and just call the script, because it's so much faster to edit and get right doing it that way instead. So anyways, well, very good. Anything else? Everybody who's here, I apologize for some of you who've shown up, and I think Tony might have been our last entry. And so I will say, Tony, you missed a lot, and definitely go and tune in to the recording that'll be out there on the Facebook pages, and it would be worth reviewing for sure. Some really, really good demos. Ray, what you got?
Hey, so real quick, I'm looking in Companion for the newest build, and I don't see it.
Don't see what? You muted.
I don't see the newest ZoomOSC in beta builds.
It's all wrapped into, all you have to do when you download Companion, it's all encompassed together. It used to be separate, but it's all compiled together now.
So now I just need to update my own Companion to the
just
newest.
Update Companion.
The latest nightly.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right.
Very good. If that's everything, I'll call it a day. I wrote a short script to end the show on one button. We'll see if it works. Here we go.